everyone. Welcome to another episode of No Bibs, Burps, Bottles. I am your host, Dr. Angela L. Harris. Always like to tell people that I go by Dr. Harris, I go by Angela, I go by Doc Sarah. I am so excited to welcome you to the podcast. If you're listening or if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm excited to have you and thank you so much for joining us. So we're going to jump right in with this bonus episode, and I have a special guest that I'm so excited to chat with this evening and dive right into it. So I welcome to our audience, No Bibs, Burps, Bottles family, child-free besties, Mr. Dane Reid. He's an author. I'm not going to steal the show. I'm going to let Mr. Dane Reid share a little bit about him. But again, this is a special bonus episode, and I know that you're in for a treat. So Dane, welcome to the No Bibs, Burps, Bottles.
Thank you. That was a good intro. I appreciate it, Dr. Angela. I really appreciate you having me on and taking the time to read my book. And you know, when you got back to me and you said that you enjoyed it, I was like over the moon, because as an artist, you know, as an author, you're an artist, and as an artist, you always want people to appreciate your work. So I'm super excited to be here. So thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you for agreeing to, when I reached out to you and I initially saw you on Instagram, I'm like, okay, Black child-free brother. Yes, I want to hear his story.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of sisters in my DM who's like, you know, they're asking, where are the brothers? Where are the brothers? And I did a podcast with 4 brothers. And then when you came out with the book, I said, I have to have this as part of my child-free book club, right? And so I'm excited, and we're going to jump right into it. But before we do, we are talking about Dane Reid's book. Now, it's not showing up as much as I would like it to.
Let me see if I can get it on my end too.
Yes,
That's not showing up on my end as well either,
yes.
but I gave you a bunch of my reasons, although not quite 1,000, but I mean, it could go to 1,000. I
Yes.
had to stop writing at some point.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
so
But I could have kept going. If you
yeah.
would have kept writing, that's the type of book it is. I would have kept reading if there were more pages. And I actually love, you guys can't see this. For those who are watching on YouTube, you can see it. But there's this, I love how you have the forget like crossed out, like forget having kids. Like I mean, like just the title
because
itself.
so it's really just the ORGET that's crossed out. The F is still there.
Yeah, and we know what that F is for, right? So I love it. I love it. So for those who don't know, Dane has written a book about being child-free and his experiences of being child-free. What was that defining moment that made you sit down and say, I'm going to write as a male, child-free male, about my experience?
COVID did it. When I started seeing everybody who had children and the difficulty that they were having educating their children at home. So I used to work in the school system, and I realized when I taught in the school system that I did my part and then I came home. I didn't have to worry about all the extra things, feeding, clothing, doing, you know, post education, but it really resonated with me when COVID hit. And parents had to do those things. Parents had to take the extra 2, 3, 4 layers to not only protect, but educate their kids, to make them aware of what was going on. That was a hard situation to try to explain to a 2, 3, 4, 5, 8-year-old what was going on. There were 28, 38, and 48 and 58-year-olds who didn't understand it at the time. And I recognized that I only had to protect myself. That's all I had to do. And the most stressful thing about it for me was not being able to travel, because I'm a traveler. That's what I do. And I spoke to friends who have children, recognizing the stress that they were under. And I just said, yeah, let me write that stuff down, you know. And I drew from my experience working in the school system, and I told some of the stories of my close friends, and I also talked about myself growing up. And this book is as much about life as it is about not giving life. and life and its challenges, why a person like myself, like yourself, like so many other people, 20% of the US population doesn't have children. 44% of people 18 to 49, according to Pew, say they're never going to have kids. This book gave reason for and a voice for us, for those people. But I also wanted to make sure that it bridged the gap between us and parents and people who don't understand, who have children, so that they can get a good laugh out of life, that they can get a good laugh out of parenting, so that they can get a good laugh out of the crazy things that their kids do, right? And I wanted them to join in on the laugh, and like we all get the joke.
I'm curious to know,
Mm-hmm.
now that this book is out there, and I like to say that even though we don't have kids, we birth our dreams, we birth our
Right,
desires. And I
right.
read at the end of your book, you said this is one of your greatest accomplishments. And I see it as
Yeah.
this birthing of your greatest accomplishment. And so I'm curious to know, what has been the reception?
I am extremely humbled by the reception for this book. People genuinely enjoy the book. People are getting it. So, what I wanted to make sure was that I made my point, but it wasn't threatening. It's enjoyable. Even if you're the person who absolutely loves your kids and hates my position of me not having kids, when you start reading this book, you're going to forget all about that until the end. And then you'll remember your position again. And then you'll say, yeah, but I disagree with you. If you look, for instance, on Amazon, the reviews are overwhelmingly like positive. I mean, some people did a really good analysis of it. Other people just said this is funny and this is good, but I really, really, really am humbled by the reception for this book.
And that leads me to one of my other questions: humor. Like, let me tell you, reading this book, there were so many times where I just busted out in laughter. And I wrote a couple of
Yeah.
things in regards
Yeah.
to baby batter in sex partners, and
Yeah.
trade sainthood for sins, when you were talking about the bump and grinding. There were so
Yeah.
many times where I just busted out laughing because you made the point, but it was also so much humor. So I was curious to know, like, is that a natural gift of yours? Was that intentional? Are
Yeah.
you a naturally funny guy and that just came through with ease in the book?
Yeah, I had just watched Everybody Hates Chris for the first time during the pandemic because, I had all this time, and that voice was in my head. But I've always been around two kinds of people: really, really intelligent people and really, really funny people. Sometimes there's an intersection between the two of them where there's really intelligent, really funny people, but I've always kept people around me who were very knowledgeable, but also people around me who just didn't take themselves so seriously. And also, too, I'm from New York, where we played the dozens with each other all the time. I have all these influences, and maybe you picked up on this. I've always loved like smart rap music. And so I like playing with words. I like manipulating words. And when you read the book, you can tell that there's a lot of manipulation of words. There's a lot of double entendres in the book, right? It means one thing, but it also means something else, right? And if you read it too fast, you're gonna miss a lot of them. But
Yes.
if you really focus on it, you get it.
Was a little bit of that part of it so that things can be digestible, because you really
Absolutely.
dropped a lot of nuggets that people will, like you said, will either miss or truly get.
I did that intentionally. I wanted to write a book where left and right both were able to sit at the table, blue and red were both able to sit at the table and eat at the same meal, right? So I wanted to make sure that it was enjoyable. I don't want to fight about this. The truth of the matter is, my life choices are not a democratic process.
Mm.
So when I express my life view, when I express my choices, it's not up for debate.
I mean, okay, let's talk about Mike. Like Mike was a
Okay, yes.
good person,
Mike is
character, friend in the book.
Mike and I are going to El Salvador in 2 weeks. We're going to Berlin in 4 weeks and Turkey. Mike is my ace. Like, we have been all over the place together and been through some experiences. This is the kind of history that Mike and I have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well,
He's a fun guy. He's a wild character,
mm-hmm.
but that's who he is.
And I loved how I could see the friendship and the support that you have for Mike and that Mike
Yeah.
has for you in the book. But Mike also experienced a little bit of drama. So again, you're going to have to read the book to find that out based on
Yes.
where you are, Dane, in your life, and now putting it out there for the world to see in regards to being a child-free male.
Yeah.
What do you think Mike has picked up from you? Like, what do you think are the things that he values from your experience being a child-free male and also writing this book?
Mike hasn't learned a damn thing. I got to tell you guys. Mike, it goes back to I'm just being honest, Mike read what I wrote about him, and he just said "F you, Dane" and laughed about it, But he these are all details that he got. Look, Mike has had to learn from his own experiences. Luckily for Mike, he's a smart guy. He is now a more stable guy. He's married. He has he's in a stable marriage, but he hasn't learned a single thing from me. I try to impart some things on him, and he's like, "Whatever, Dane. That's just who he is. That's who my friends are in general. They can get a good laugh out of my life. I get a good laugh out of theirs, and they still don't change.
I
They
love
just yeah
you fall in love with Mike. You actually fall in love with
yeah.
all the people in your book, from your parents to your brothers. Like, you did a great illustration of your experiences. So going from Mike, and I'm glad that he's in a better place. I want to talk about your parents and the way you
Okay.
illustrated, your upbringing, and at the point where your brothers
Mhm.
transitioned and you were the only child. And so when I talk to Childfree Sistahs, they're like, my parents, they keep nudging me to have kids. They keep nudging. It comes at different points, whether it's the 20s or the 30s, or you can still have a baby at 40. So where are your parents today? Like, I'm wondering, from a male's perspective, are you getting that nudge? Like, there's still time for you to give us grandkids.
So it's really interesting because my parents, when they had me, their greatest objective was for me to live my life in a good place, in a happy place, for me to pursue my dreams. My parents have supported me as I built my business, as I became a voice actor. And they have seen me in places where I have risen and places that I have fallen. They have understood my struggles, and I talk about my struggles throughout the book, whether they're financial or whether they're emotional, psychological, whether they're dealing with relationships, insecurities, et cetera, et cetera. And my parents have been there for me in every step of that. They haven't always understood, but they still supported. And so the most important thing for my parents has always been that I'm okay. So whatever decision that I make in that, the result is the most important thing. My parents have grandchildren from my brothers. They're fine with where they are. They never pressured my brothers to have children. and they've never pressured me to have children. And so they're not like, hey, you got to have kids so that we can have grandkids. My parents spent a lot of time concerned over the future of their grandchildren. They understand, right? They try to take an interest in not just, oh, I have grandkids, but what is the status of their grandkids? Are they safe? Are they healthy? Are they being educated? What is going to be their future? You know, those things are just important to my family.
Yeah, so I have another question in regards to, you reference your parents, and you have
Yeah.
this part in the book where you're talking about older parents and younger parents, and I thought that chapter was really powerful. Say more about that, in the state of, there's some people deciding not to have kids because they're like, kids are just out of control and we don't have those old school values. And so you wrote eloquently about those type of groups in your book. So I just wanted to hear you say more about that and your thoughts.
Yeah, so deciding on when to have children is a tough decision, right? Because what happens is you can start off early having children, but then it often messes up with career opportunities, particularly when it comes to women, right? Um, or you can decide to have kids later in life. You can be in the club, dropping it like it's hot, you know, doing all the things that, 20 something year olds do, and then settle down and then have older children. What you bring to your children when they're older is life experience. You've made some of the mistakes or a lot of the mistakes in life. And you can basically say to your kids, hey, don't do this. You have a demeanor that's different than you had when you were in your 20s, hopefully. I know that I do. You know, I have a much greater maturity about me now, a much greater certainty about me now. And there are lots of studies that show that, for instance, children who have older parents tend to be more mature. They tend to be less destructive. They tend to be more advanced in school, more serious about, education and about life, et cetera, et cetera. So there are great advantages to that. But then, you then have a kid who, when you're 50, they're 10 and you're too old to throw the ball around, or you don't really want to. You're just like, oh man, this again, you can't relate to some of the new terms that the kids are using. But then it's also harder to relate to younger people and relate to your kids and understand what the slang is and the customs are.
Kind of moving from the parent, older parents and younger parents. I'm curious to know a little bit about just this, and I don't want to say breakthrough, but you actually like claiming this child-free life that's really important to you, that you feel comfortable
Yeah.
in. And I think for men, for men of color, for
Yeah.
Black men, it could be
And
a,
I also want to point out my heritage, because I'm a Jamaican American as well. My family is Jamaican. My grandparents on their father's sides were both Jamaican men who are often very boastful. I have my grandmothers were both Cuban ladies, but yeah, so my grandfather, and I talk about that as well. My grandfather was not a responsible kind of guy, who had 20 up to, I think, 27 is a rumored number. He never knew how many children he had. So I didn't want to be that, and there's an irony in the last chapter of that doctor who was also Jamaican and knew my grandfather, and that's something that I won't ruin it for people, but that's like absolutely crazy that he knew my grandfather. And yeah, it's difficult speaking to other people who want to engage me in kind of an argument of sorts.
As you talk about the cultural piece of, because I
Mhm.
do think that the space is dominated by child-free women, right? And so I think it's
Yes.
refreshing when men can share their experiences. But with that being said, the big V, the vasectomy, right? And
Yeah.
it's this, I'm not gonna cut off my manhood. And so I'm
Yeah.
curious to know how you have navigated that when men try to challenge you, like, dude, you really went through with that, opposed to maybe some people who have 5, 6, 7, 20 kids out there. So tell me a little bit more about this. How do you navigate you being intentional about having a vasectomy and people, mostly men, challenging you about that in your manhood?
Well, this goes back to, my history growing up in New York and shooting the dozens with people, right? Like I'm probably not the guy that you want to, be funny with, right? So like, oh man, you cut off your manhood. No, it still works. Send your woman over. We'll prove it to you, But I think for one thing, there's a lot of misinformation with men in regards to vasectomy. They often think that after they have a vasectomy, things won't work properly. It's not just, oh, well, I won't be able to have children anymore, but they think they'll have erectile problems. They believe that the amount of baby batter, as I pointed out in the book, won't be won't be as strong when when they are released. They want that roar, and they think it's going to be more of a poof, But I assure you, it's a roar. you know,
It
I'm
works.
45 years old. It still roars. Okay. I promise you guys, I assure guys that they're going to be okay. I can tell you that there are experiences that some of these same guys have had being dragged in court, arguing on the street with women that they no longer want to be involved with, but they're stuck to for 18, 25 years, whatever the law is. Some of those same guys are still just concerned about the roar.
Hey, I'm stopping my own YouTube video and podcast episode to let you know about NoBibsBurpsBottles.com. That's right, stop and visit our website today. We have a bunch of awesome child-free pride merchandise made especially for you. Visit NoBibsBurpsBottles.com today. Peace. So Dane, again, so many great chapters, so much humor, but kind of maybe transitioning a little bit about just men in general. But I know the sisters that I talk to in regards to No Bibs, Burps, Bottles, there's this defining age of 30. Like 30, you have to be married, you have to have kids, you have to have the house and the dog. You just have to have it all together. I'm wondering, from your perspective as a child-free male, like, was there any pressures along the way, like, again, societal pressures of like, 30, like what's that magical number for men that you must have kids, you should be married, should?
Yeah, so in my first chapter, I talk about the word should, and that I think that it should be banned. I think people have to define themselves. And throughout my life, I have always been a little bit different. And I've never been afraid to be different. It's really difficult for me to talk about people who aren't different because I just don't relate to that. I don't know what that number is for men. I think a lot of men get caught in experiences because they're just trying to have a good time, and as I talk about, I was also almost caught, several times in some really bad situations, and I think it just happens, and we go and grow with it. I don't think I don't remember being 5 years old talking about when I needed to get married or when I needed to have kids. But I remember being 5 years old, little girls playing with Barbie and saying that they wanted to get married and that they wanted to have kids one day. I'm just, the experiences are just not the same. The messages that society tells us, that our families tell us, are just very different. I think what's awesome is that those things are changing. As you point out, womanhood is not defined by motherhood, right? I think that we are all allowed to be our greatest selves. And whenever that time is that's right for you to make any big decision, you will know it and you will execute it because it'll be part of your journey for greatness. So I have just people putting pressure on themselves. And I understand for women making that decision in a certain timely manner is more crucial for men. As I point out, men can keep squirting up till death. So I understand the pressure that women have to do it between, generally, people start looking at 25 to 40, and ideally somewhere around 30 years old. It's different if you're going to make that decision, you probably want to make it in that time. But I'm not a guy who pushes anybody to make that decision. I discourage that decision, so rock on, have a good time in your life.
So we've talked about Mike. We got to get to Ben and Jessica. Is it Ben and Jessica, right?
Yes.
So
yes,
they were an interesting couple and interesting
so
dynamics.
So here's a secret about Ben and Jessica. Ben and Jessica are a representation of friends that I did not want to name. They are not just one couple. Ben and Jessica are multiple people in my life who I thought would be too hard to explain if I said, well, there's this couple named, Sarah and Tim, and then there's this other couple. So I rolled all of these people and all of their problems into this representation of Ben and Jessica. And so what you're hearing are multiple people's stories.
So with that being said, like, how do these individuals support you in your child-free life, right? So I think as child-free individuals, we're going to the birthday parties and maybe you have a goddaughter or a godson or your Uncle Dane to somebody, but how do your friends who have all these different dynamics rolled up into Ben and Jessica, how do they support you as a child-free individual?
I think more so I support them as parents than they support me as a child-free individual. They don't have the level of flexibility to support me. I support them when they call, when they have a few minutes in their car coming home from work, and before they get with the kids and everything like that, and it's too chaotic, they call me on the phone and we talk. I don't often call my parent friends, and because I already know they're screaming in the background, running around, there's arguing, so I wait for them to call me, and they know that I'm here. We can still laugh and joke about things that are going on, things that used to go on when back in the day when they were cool. But but in terms of me, listen, since I've written this book, before I've written this book, I've had so many people say to me, gosh, I wish that I could do what you do. They see me on Instagram, they see me on Facebook, and they see what I'm doing. They see that I'm, mostly having a good time. Not that it's all easy. It's not all easy, but I'm enjoying a good part of my life, and they share in that story more so than I share in their stories. They're more fascinated by what I do than I am by what they do, because when they tell me their stories, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10 of them, those stories are so similar that I can roll them into two characters, Ben and Jessica. My parent friends are my friends. And I don't think that they look at me as oh my gosh, we got to support him. He's about to fall apart. No, I got to support you.
Sure.
You're the one with the problems, buddy.
Yes, yes. And I love that there was a part
Yeah.
where someone asked you to watch the kids. And literally before I read the next line, I was like, hell to the no. Like, and you were like,
Not
hell
at
to
my
the
house.
no.
Yeah, no, I wasn't going to do it at my house. I was like, no,
And
I
that's
got
a
stuff to
huge
do.
ask. That's a huge
Yeah,
ask.
that's a huge
So,
ask.
so chapter 23 was a good chapter for me because I'm also a mental health advocate and former
Yeah.
therapist. And in this chapter, you talked about mental health, which I think is important,
Yes.
whether you're child free or becoming a parent. I wanted you to talk a little bit more about why writing that particular chapter was important. What came out for you while writing that particular chapter? Because it was pretty
Yeah.
deep.
When I did the audio book for that chapter, it was really hard for me to do. I had to take multiple breaks from that chapter. I talk about some very personal things, from the death of my uncle and watching him die. Um, I talk about some struggles that I've had. Yeah, chapter 23 is the Anthony Bourdain one. And I also introduce people to who are not familiar with the idea of antinatalism without actually saying it. So, I want people to understand that what may have been a good idea for your parents might not have been a good idea for you. You're the one, once you're born, no matter how much support they give you, you have to bear the brunt of the things that happen to you. Because when I went to the hospital, and I've had some health problems in the past few years, my mother helped me get to the hospital, but she may have felt bad, but ultimately I'm the only one who's really in pain, right? When you have children, you have to remember that. That's something to consider. There's no consent slip that comes with life. You're making a decision for somebody else. So that's something that I wanted people to give some thought to. And so give real thought to what you're doing and how that affects the life of not just yourself, not just your partner, but this person that you're bringing into life. So I thought that was really important to share these experiences and these ideas that most people don't consider in that chapter. I wanted to get deeper, and as you see in the book, I start getting more serious towards the end of the book.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that chapter was very emotional for me, and I have struggled with some mental health issues in my life, largely because of the pressures of should in life, largely because financial pressures, because my parents, they did as best as they could, but I wasn't born into the Hilton family, or I'm not a Gates, or any of those families. I'm a Reid, and what my parents had to offer me was what they built as much as they could for themselves. And that wasn't enough to keep me from filing bankruptcy, for instance, or struggling to keep my business going, which is my dream. So those are things that that I address
Yeah.
in that chapter, and it's yeah, it's much more thought provoking in that chapter than in others.
So in the book,
Okay.
you kind of reference your stroke game, right? And you know that you're a master of that. Like, you know, I'm
I'm
not
Jamaican, so we take pride in that.
I'm not
You know.
I'm not gonna give the spoiler alerts. You gotta directing people to the book. But I'm curious to
Okay.
know, you talk about these encounters with child-free women and the benefits of that and
Yeah.
mothers. And I know sometimes you're not necessarily diving into dating, but sometimes it's real when you're kind of, whether it's friendships, intimate partner relationships. So I'm curious to know, do you think most people experience that? Like, you gotta be quiet, like, I guess I'm curious to know, like, why was
Yeah.
that important to put in the book?
There
That
was listen, and I think this is a real thing, especially as you get older and you're dating more and stuff like that, you're gonna run into people who have children. And I of course did. I had some experiences that I didn't share in the book. I remember working well, let me not tell too much. Well, I've had some situations where I was busted by people's kids. It yeah, there have been some situations. So when you date someone with kids, it changes the dynamic of how you interact with them on a sexual level as well. And I wanted to play around with that and have a little fun with it, as I did with so many other things. And then as a man, there were times that I felt challenged by that. Let me see if I can make you, bust and just let it all out. But then it's like, oh man, I don't want to scar these kids for life. Like, I may have been broken up with their mommy 15 years ago, but they still remember that one traumatic experience. And now they got to come see Dr. Angela for mental health, because Dane Reid messed them up. So
I thought that was a
I
great
wanted to share.
great
I
chapter.
wanted to share those kind of things, just those little things, those things that basically just make us all laugh. I mean, those were fun things.
And make us laugh, but also things that are serious. I think, as
Yeah.
child-free women, I always ask the question, what do you prefer? Because as you said, most women who are still dating or desire to be married, by a certain age, most of the people you're running into have children. So I thought that chapter, although playful, very serious. Because I think women
Yeah.
like me and others are like, do I really want to date this great guy who has a 6-year-old or a 3-year-old or an
Right.
infant? I posted
Right.
something on my Instagram recently, like, no, if met this great guy, but he just had a newborn,
Right.
you're not
Right.
for me. You're not for
Yeah.
me. So
Yeah.
Brittany and Carla,
Yeah.
that last chapter, whew,
Yeah. Yeah. So that is entirely a real situation what really happened to me in 2001.
that
And
was that chapter. When we talk about, I thought the mental health one, chapter 23, was that
yeah.
next chapter with those two. I was just like, my mouth. But again, the vulnerability. So go ahead and tell me, because I have a follow-up question, but I'm curious to know how it was for you writing about Brittany and Carla.
Yeah. So I was involved in a toxic relationship for 4.5 years with the woman. And I love this woman, but I knew I could never take this woman seriously. And in the book of Brittany, you see why I couldn't take her seriously. And so, but I continued this relationship because when you're young, you just want to have fun, right? Like love means a whole different thing when you're in your early 20s than it does in your early 40s, for instance. And so, but I was also wise enough to know that this couldn't go any further. And Brittany was a person who hurt me because she was a hurt person. And I continued to play on her hurt for my own selfish reasons until it came to a head. And Carla in the book was someone who I actually went to school with, and we were good friends. And she was interested in me for, as a boyfriend figure, but she was cool with us, not going, taking that step into being boyfriend and girlfriend, because she understood that I had a girlfriend, and she felt that she got more out of me, quite honestly, than my actual girlfriend was getting. And so I don't want to get into the spoiler of the chapter, but there's a hard hitting situation in that chapter that I think especially men should pay attention to.
I
I
mean,
think after you read that chapter, go ahead, don't worry about the poof or the boom, just go get the vasectomy after that chapter.
you have to get the book in order to really understand how powerful chapter 23 is in the chapter about Brittany and Carla. And I think from
Chapter 24.
24,
Yeah, chapter
um,
23 and chapter
yes,
24 are definitely the most powerful chapters.
yes. And it the question that I had after all the wow moments, like literally when I got to the period, and you asked the question of, like, you talked about forgiving yourself. I'm
Yeah.
curious to know, if you had the opportunity to sit in front of Brittany and to sit in front of Carla, what would you say? What would that conversation be like and feel like for you?
I have to be really honest. I do sometimes think about Brittany because we don't have any kind of contact, any social media contact or anything. And I worry about her, quite honestly, the direction of her life. I knew that the last time I spoke to her, she was married, and she did have a daughter at the time, and she continued her dysfunction in that. It's crazy. So I do worry and wonder sometimes where she is in the world, and if she is in the world, because of the practices that she was involved in. It just makes me wonder if she's even in the world, right? Carla, had more communication with up to a few years ago. I want to say maybe 2016 or so, 2017. Maybe we corresponded through social media. And she has two children. She has a son and a daughter, and they're probably grown now, actually. So not worried so much about her. She had her head on straight. The people who got it together, you just wish them well, and they go about their way. The people who you've connected with, who, at least me, who were kind of very fragmented in the way that they thought and conducted their lives, and shattered, I do worry and wonder about them. So
Mhm.
yeah, I do occasionally think about her,
Mhm.
you know.
And I think that is a good way to really conclude that this is an awesome book from beginning to end. You did a great job in
Thank you.
capturing so many different stories. The humor by itself, it just takes you from story to story to
Yeah.
story. I know that parents will get something out of this, right? When I was reading it, this would, like, if I'm thinking about having a kid, this is a book to read. If I don't want kids, this is a book to read. Like, so you did
If
a
you
great,
have kids, this
yes,
is a book to read,
yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So with the writing portion in general, what were the stumbling blocks, writer's block? How did you get through that? Anything that you will tell future writers who want to share their narrative regarding their child-free journey or whatever journey that is?
You know, in terms of writing, I have to say that I've been writing since I can remember. I've always loved writing. My dad actually owns a bookstore, and that's how we got through school, college, etc. That's how I was raised. I was raised in a bookstore. So I met a lot of writers throughout the days. I got a chance to look at a lot of books. So yeah, writing was something that I loved. I absolutely love doing. But the process of writing for me, and I would recommend this for anyone who wants to write, is first start by writing your ideas down. Don't be pressured to write the whole book at one time. Write out what are your ideas. Write out as many of your ideas as possible. How is this story going to go? How is this book going to go? Then you want to organize your thoughts. Then you want to do pre-writing. And I think pre-writing is what really helped me with this book to put things together. You scribble down some things here, you write out a whole paragraph, maybe it's incomplete, it's okay. Come back to it when you have a way to connect all of it. And you do that from chapter to chapter, and that's what I did. So it's all about just start writing. Write your ideas, and like the church folks say, pray without ceasing, write without ceasing. You
Yes,
know, you
yes,
have to
yes.
be consistent if you want a result. So even your bad ideas, write them out. At the end, you'll edit some things out. And if you have a good editor, your editor will edit some things out. My editor edited things out. He was like, "You're going too far. You can't put this in a book." He's like, "You
Wow.
cannot say this." And I was like, damn it. I'm right on the line. Like, I'm right just short of stepping over the line of being canceled with this book.
But it
This
was
book was
done, it was done eloquently. I can see where you're
thank
like, I'm about to put my big toe over
yeah,
this
yeah,
line. Up,
yeah,
I'm gonna
yeah,
pull it back. So
yeah.
again, the readers, the audience, you guys are in for a great treat. So Dane, please tell my listeners, my viewers, where they can find you, what else you have on the horizon, and any last pieces of nuggets that you like to share with No Bibs Burps Bottles.
Well, if you don't own this book already, go to childfreebook.com, and hopefully, Dr. Angela, you'll leave a link in the description.
Yes.
So yeah, go to the link in the description if you're on YouTube or any other platform, and Dr. Angela will leave the link. Child Free Book. It's 3 words. It's easy to remember. As in terms of where to find me, you can find me on Instagram. That's where I am most of the time. I'm either Dane_Reid or Forget Having Kids, I'm Having Fun is my page dedicated to this book, where I put out all my child-free content and stuff like that. And yeah, that's really it. I'm a voice actor by day. This is, I do that all day. You probably heard me no matter where you are, in North Carolina. I've been on the radio a million times. I've done, TV commercials. I've done so much with my voice. And now I have, lent it to this book as well, with the audio book. So it's available on audiobook, ebook, and paperback. So yeah, that's me. And when I'm not doing that, I'm somewhere else in the world.
Yes,
I'm somewhere
yes.
else in the world. So we have some big things planned in terms of traveling. My girlfriend and I are going to the West Coast. My goal is to reach all 50 states. So I will reach 40 of them in a few weeks. Mike and I are going to El Salvador. My goal is to reach every country on land in North and South America. So I have 2 more countries in North America. So Mike and I are going to El Salvador. We're going to Berlin. We're going to Prague. We're going to Turkey. We're going. You know, Mike has to get a babysitter though. I don't have to.
Of course, of course. Well,
Mike needs a babysitter.
Dane, it has been a pleasure chatting with you. And for my viewers and
Yes,
for my
definitely.
listeners, I do hope that you enjoyed this interview with author,
I had so much
traveler,
fun. I had so
voiceover.
much fun. Thank you.
I,
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. And I will put all the information on where you can find Dane, purchase his book in the description notes. I want to thank my No Bibs Burps Bottles community for rocking with me, for following. If you like this episode, please make sure to like, subscribe, leave us a comment, leave Dane a comment on his Instagram.
Yeah.
But I just thank you for being in this space. And remember, you know, guys, how I end every episode. Womanhood is not synonymous with motherhood. Thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.